I've seen someone build real wealth using infinite banking, and I've seen someone put six figures into it and almost immediately wish they hadn't. Same exact strategy, completely different experience. And honestly, it's not the policy that they were using, it's how they were using it. Welcome back to Spicy Takes and Tax Breaks. I'm Aubree, your write-off queen, and this is one of those topics where people think they understand it and they truly don't. So let's just make this really simple today. When most people hear infinite banking, they think, okay, I'm putting my money somewhere and I can just use it whenever I want, tax-free, right? But that's not what it is actually. Not even close, really. You're buying a life insurance policy, and that does build value over time. It gives you the ability to borrow against it even. But the real question is, do you actually understand how borrowing works? Because if you don't, this is going to feel like a terrible decision really, really quickly. And it's something I see happen all the time. Let's say you put $50,000 into a policy, and early on, you're not going to have access to all that $50,000. And a lot of people get frustrated with it because they're like, wait, I put in $50,000, why can't I access it? They had the understanding this was like a savings account in a way. And maybe you'll have some access, you'll have $30,000, maybe $35,000 right away. But part of that money is going towards how the policy is being structured. So fast forward a few months, something comes up, you need $30,000 of it. And this is the exact moment where people are like, what? Or they mess this up because they think, okay, I'm just going to pull it out. You can't just pull it out. You have to borrow against it, and that's a completely different mindset. So let's say you do, you borrow the $30,000. It hits your account, but your full $50,000 is still inside the policy. It's intact, it's growing, and this is where people go, okay, I like this, and I do too. But that's also where they're not thinking it through. That $30,000, it's a loan. It has to be paid interest. It has to be managed correctly. And if you don't go into it expecting that, this is where it starts to feel pretty tight. Like your money's stuck or that you're not able to access it, and people start to spiral and kind of go the wrong direction here. They panic a little bit. They start moving things around. They pull things incorrectly. And now something that was supposed to be long-term feels like a pretty short-term mistake. The strategy behind it, though, didn't fail. The expectations weren't set correctly up front, or the understanding wasn't there with a plan in place to execute it. So let me show you how this is actually going to play out in real scenarios, because this is where hopefully it's going to click. Two people, same exact $50,000, same policy. The first person, they need money quickly. There is no real plan, no structure behind it, so they borrow. And now that they have that loan, they have interest building, and there is no strategy to pay it back. And mentally, it feels like, crap, I locked up my money and now I have to pay to access my own money. And so they start to react. They start pulling more money. They mess with the structure. And within a year, they are saying this didn't work. This was a terrible plan. But it's not that the plan or the idea behind it didn't work. It's that they used a long-term tool for a short-term problem, and they were expecting that long-term gain and result. Let's go through the second person. Completely different person, but the same $50,000. Same exact access, same policy. But they don't need the money. They don't need to borrow it right away. And they've got income coming in. They have reserves saved up. And so when they're borrowing, it's intentional. They have a plan to pay it back, and they have a strategy and reason to be borrowing in that capacity. So let's say instead of pulling out $30,000 from their business and increasing their taxes, they're borrowing it from their policy. What happens now? Their income stays cleaner. Tax situation is much, much more controllable. And their cash flow stays intact throughout this. And they have a plan to manage the loan while their initial investment is still growing. So instead of pressure, they've got flexibility. The same exact strategy here, but different behavior with the plan to execute. And that's really the difference for most of these strategies. And the part that almost nobody is explaining clearly when going through this is when you're borrowing from your policy, you're not taking your money out. It's amazing. You're borrowing against that money, that asset. So your policy is staying intact. What that means is that your money, your full investment, even if you've borrowed from it, is still there and it is still growing. It is still working on your behalf. And that's why people say, well, it keeps growing. I'm making money on my money versus having to borrow from a bank. But we have to remember that loan does have interest. So if you don't have money in a strategy to be borrowing and paying it back, you get kind of into a bad situation. There are terms that go with this too. So if you're not managing it correctly, it will work against you. So remember, it's not free money. It is a controlled access to capital, basically. And those are very different things, especially when you have to pay it back. So people try to stack things like this on top of trust, and they think they have this magical tax loop, and they think they've really unlocked something. You haven't, unless, again, done very, very strictly incorrect. But a trust, it doesn't make this tax-free. It doesn't make it untouchable if you're ever in trouble. It's about control and what you're putting and how you're navigating those funds back and forth. It's about structure. It is about having that long-term plan in place when you're doing it. Again, not magic, but if you don't understand that base and have a plan behind it, it's not going to work. You're just going to be adding to the complexity and the confusion and compliance that stacks on top of it. And the truth most people don't want to hear too with it, I believe, is like most people shouldn't be doing this yet, in my opinion. I see a lot of people start this way too early on, and it does cause a lot of unnecessary headache and unnecessary expense. It's not because it's bad, but it's because it does require consistent income. It does require having those reserves in place already. It does require having some sort of long-term thinking, or at least an idea of a plan that can be pivoted and shifted. And most people are still trying to stabilize things when they start dipping into this. And that's not step 1. It is step 8 to 12 at best. And if I were going to be building toward this, I wouldn't start here unless you have those things in place. I'd start with finding that stable income and having that revenue stream. I would have real reserves in place. Make sure that you have clean books to rely on for these financial numbers. Make sure that you have a clear structure in place and how all of this would flow back. And then when you're layering this in, it's a solution. It's a tool for you. It is not a fix or a Band-Aid for something you already have going on. It's something that you're able to build off of and deploy correctly. So tools only work when they have a plan and you know how to use them. You don't want to pick up a hole saw as a 3-year-old. You're going to chop your arm off. So when it's done right, it is so, so powerful. But when it's done wrong, you end up with a chopped off arm. So this is the real takeaway. The strategy doesn't create this discipline for you. It exposes whether you've already have it or not and if it works. That's why so many people walk away disappointed, not because the plan was bad or it doesn't work. It's because there was no plan in place or they weren't ready for it. So if you actually want to understand how to build wealth and not just buy strategies, that's exactly what we're going to get into in the next episode. Make sure to hit subscribe below.